feel free to turn off your mic. Probably should have started recording before I started my spiel, but we are where we are. We'll talk about, so today we've got a few bits to cover, some sort of basic bits that I wanted to talk about, but also hopefully a couple of speakers who can talk about what they're doing, and we can get involved with that work, and then we'll cover events and notices at the end, if that's all right. Because the nature of this is we get different people each time, so it's probably helpful to do a sort of brief round table of introductions, super brief if we can, so that we don't eat into all the time. So just name where you're from, what you do, I guess, in terms of this agenda. I'm just going to go around on the order you're on my screen. So firstly, I'm Sam Perry. I'm the Green Bargaining Officer for Yorkshire and Humber TUC. Jenny?
Hi, I'm Jenny Patient. I'm from Sheffield. I'm involved in South Yorkshire Climate Alliance. I'm not in work at the moment, but I'm still active in my Unite not-for-profit branch. And I'll say later about a conference we're organising on the 9th of November.
Yes, thanks. Next is Catherine.
Hello, I'm Catherine. I'm from Wakefield Trades Council and Wakefield NEU, and I do a coordinate and eco-educators network for West Yorkshire, and I am the health and safety rep for the branch. So I do green stuff, health, safety and environment for the NEU in Wakefield.
Fantastic. Next on my screen is Andrew.
Hello, I'm a Unison rep for Unison Northern Health and Community. I think that's right, we changed our name recently. I'm also got a couple of officer positions, so there you go.
Fantastic. We got Simon.
Hello, hopefully you can hear me. I'm using the mic on the webcam. Yeah, I used to work at the TUC Union Learn about a decade ago now. I am now making podcasts and for Leeds and West Yorkshire, and I have a podcast about working in Leeds that anyone can come on and talk about what they're doing for work during this decade. So yeah, that's me. And I'm interested in green stuff in general, so that's why I'm the unions, so that's why I'm here.
Fantastic, good to have you. We've got Leanne.
Hello, my name's Leanne Vickers. I'm a project manager at Leeds City Council, working in housing predominantly, and I'm also a Unite trade union rep.
Brilliant. Pat. Oh, maybe stepped away or can't unmute. Let's go to Gwen.
I'm Gwen Vardigans, and sorry, I've got a cold, so I'm a bit croaky. Gwen Vardigans, I'm in Unite Community, and I'm a delegate for the York Trades Council, and I've been to some of these transition meetings before, so very keen on that. Okay, yes. So thank you.
Thank you. Debbie?
Debbie Cobbett, UCU, Yorkshire and Humber Retired Members Branch Delegate to York Trades Council and Environmental Officer for both of them.
Lovely, thanks Debbie. We're just doing intros for those who have just joined. Dave Merritt.
Apologies, I couldn't get the cursor to the mute button. Dave Merritt, York Trades Council, TSSA, North East General Branch, and also a local Labour councillor.
Fantastic.
York.
Thanks, Dave. And then we have Chris Butler, but it doesn't look like he's there. It looks like he stepped away. So maybe we'll get him when he comes back. And then we've got our two guest speakers on this, or two speakers to tell us about various aspects that they're working on. So we'll who are the Johns, who are, if we can wait, and we'll introduce you when we get to your bit, if that makes sense. Thanks for joining us. So just to kind of cover the basic things, welcome everyone, and thank you for being here. We have historically kept minutes for these meetings, but actually I don't really know why we're doing that, because it's not a very formal meeting. We're just trying to catch up and do a bit of learning, between us. So I'm going to keep making notes on what we've covered, and I'll put those online so that those who find that useful can see them, but we won't check the accuracy of them. That's not to hoodwink anyone. If you do notice anything incorrect, then please tell me. But I just think it sort of disrupts the flow of this if we don't just move straight on with the content. So we'll dive straight into the first thing. So John Witcher is here from Fuel Poverty Action. Hi, John. Thank you for joining us. I will share with the notes the launch of the Energy for All campaign, which launched recently and which John is leading on from a trade union point of view. Perhaps you are able to tell us, John, about that campaign and how maybe in our region we can get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, sorry about that. You might notice the lights are flickering here. I'm in Plymouth and we're having some weird power outages at the moment. So if I suddenly drop out, apologies. But yeah, we've only just got the power back on. Hi everyone, and thanks, Sam, for having me here. So yeah, I'm John. I handle unions and communities at Fuel Poverty Action, particularly relating to the Energy for All campaign. Energy for All was a demand that we initially came up with as a group around about 2 years ago, where we were noticing a lot of different links from a lot of our previous fuel poverty campaigning. We've been doing energy bills and rights, we've been campaigning against cladding, and we've been working with groups like DPAC and the National Pensioners Convention. And one of the things that kept coming up was this idea of, catering to everyone's needs. The other thing, as an organisation, obviously, Fuel Poverty Action started by a group of friends who met at Climate Camp. And the reason they started was because they wanted to campaign both on cost of living and climate issues, because essentially we see this as one and the same crisis. So yeah, the Energy for All campaign is a demand essentially for a universal free energy allowance. So this means that every household gets enough energy for heating, cooking, and lighting. It's also not means tested, which is a big part of this. And essentially, yeah, by doing this, we believe not only is it going to save thousands of lives, because every year ONS publishes an excess winter deaths figure, and this is because of people who are in cold homes switching the heating off, which is okay if you're young, but if you're older, it can be potentially fatal. And then the other part of why I personally got involved with the campaign and what drew me to it was actually the idea of changing injustices to the pricing system. Because at the moment, what we have with a standing charge on energy is effectively anyone who uses very little energy is paying more per unit than someone with a mansion or a swimming pool who is paying a lot less per unit. So that whole pricing system is the wrong way round, it's upside down, and we want to turn it the other way up. The fairest way to do that then is for energy prices to go, the best way to do that is for energy prices to go up, but we need to do it in a fair way. And if we allow energy prices to go up, we need to essentially guarantee everyone's essential needs are met. So by giving everyone the energy that they need, we then make sure that those who've, got swimming pools, or maybe, some heavy metal head with about 30 amplifiers, apologies to anyone who's into that kind of music, they should have to, the basic principle is they should pay more because they're using more energy in a non-essential way. There's a massive benefit for climate as well, though, because our housing stock is the leakiest and dampest in Europe. Sam is far more knowledgeable about this than me. But by changing the pricing system, this is going to be a massive incentive to retrofit homes. One of my understandings of it is because if we have arbitrary targets to try and retrofit homes, it does open the door for a lot of corruption, a lot of cowboys. We're already seeing this with some of the providers of retrofit up in Scotland, where there's even sort of essentially organised crime doing hustles on people for retrofitting their homes. And the analogy I always think about is in the 1990s when the Tony Blair's Labour government, I think under good intentions, brought in this idea of like, let's have a target for the amount of hospital beds, the reduce waiting times, and increase the amount of hospital wards. But what that turned to in practice was corridors being renamed hospital wards, wheels being taken off stretchers to say they're hospital beds, and the position of a hello nurse created, which was someone who came round, said hello to you when you got into the hospital, to effectively reduce the waiting time for you only then to have to wait several hours to actually be treated. Without a pricing system like this is likely what we're already seeing with retrofitting. So by bringing in this energy allowance, this is going to be a massive incentive on retrofitting homes. And I think this is where what we've currently been doing with campaigning unions has been something that has been very popular, because obviously some trade unions are a little bit more progressive on climate change, and then there's others where we could say could do with some improvement, is probably the fair way of saying it. And what I've often found when I've gone and spoken to certain branches, I've been and spoken to a couple of branches in Coventry, where initially they kind of supported the campaign begrudgingly against the climate aspect because of the fuel poverty of it. They were like, they're not too keen on the climate aspect, but they liked the idea of giving everyone an essential energy allowance. So I think there's a lot of power in this demand to sort of change the dialogue on climate justice and sustainability within unions, making people think that it's not just, a bunch of hippies wanting nice gardens, but it is actually practical steps which do make, people's lives better. And, we can, it isn't one or the other, helping people or helping the environment. We can do both. That's a very condensed sort of talk. I think I've covered all of my key points. So what I'd rather do, if we got a few minutes, or did you want me to do at the end, is just open it to questions. That's usually is the better way to answer things.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, John. That's a really good introduction. And I mean, it's a really important campaign, and it's obviously got that fight that we talk about at the end between the sort of the kind of climate without society tied into it issue is exactly what this group is. And I think everyone on this call is kind of very conscious of obviously the kind of climate impacts and the potential for that social justice piece tie really well together in this particular campaign. And obviously it kind of the leveling up, to use that old jargon that we don't really like anymore, potential of a sort of social tariff. Obviously the key target there is the working class who we represent. And so yes, I think it's the right campaign. It's a great thing. So we can open this up. I did just wonder if briefly you were able to say, or maybe I can take the first question on what can we do to help? What can trade union branches or trades councils or whoever do to support this campaign?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I had forgotten to say that. Yes, we are at the moment, we're hoping that so first off is affiliate your branch. I will send some links to Sam shortly, because I'm a little bit flustered because of the power outage, which is why I've got I'm still there as unknown user. So I will send that. So affiliate your branch to Fuel Poverty Action with grassroots funded. So even, whatever your branch can chip in helps to the campaigning. We want to do more. We did a fringe event at TUC just gone. We'd like to do some more fringe events, effectively going for like the big 5 unions. So but obviously USDOR, Unite and GMB as the key ones there. So that's where the money would go if you affiliate, would be for us to book rooms, print materials, so we can make more connections within those unions. The other thing that we, as well as your branch signing the manifesto, affiliating, is conference motions. This is around about the time of year where unions will be prepping their motions for conference. And obviously the more branches that support it and districts and what have you, the more likely it is going to be successful to be taken to to conference, get on the priority. So yeah, there again, I can send links to that. As many unions as possible. We've currently got support from the Bakers Union and the PCS, but obviously these are smaller unions, so it was easier to sort of build those networks in there. Some of the bigger unions, ones that we're really interested, but we do want every union to affiliate support, but particularly the big unions, Unite, Unison, USDOR, GMB, and then NEU as well, because obviously they've got the biggest amount of workers and they've got the most resources. And then with the exception of NEU, they've also got votes on the National Executive for Labour, which would be really helpful, but you all know this anyway. So yeah, if you are in one of those unions and would like to get involved, please do get in contact. I'll send you my email address, and do proposed motions. Beyond that, the other thing is we have a working group called Workers for Energy for All. We meet on the last Tuesday of every month. Anyone who's a trade unionist is welcome to attend. And at the moment, we get inundated with requests to go and speak at branch meetings. Fortunately, because I'm one person with a 4-year-old daughter, I don't get to go and speak at as many of them because they all tend to be in the evening. So it's quite a difficult time. They're all at that sort of key hour of 6 o'clock, even if they are on Zoom. So if we are going to be organising a little bit of a speakers bureau where we will, train everyone up to do the key points of the demand, explain a little bit more about it, and then hopefully everyone feels confident to go and speak if they're invited to speak at another union branch, maybe it's a neighbouring branch or even in a different union, to attend and speak at that. I think that's all those. Do you want to go to another question?
That's great, thanks. Yeah, Catherine, you got your hand up.
Hello, I've been looking for the paper for the leaflet. We did a stall with Unite Community, Leeds, Wakefield, and York branch, and they have got a fabulous leaflet and have done loads and loads of work on this. So I was just looking to sort of just go, so we have done that sort, and it was really, really productive. I wanted to ask one of the questions that we had, and it's sort of, because there's a lot of interest in the free energy, but a lot of people didn't think it was realistic, but quite a lot of people were very, very interested in the idea of the standing charge being put on after, so you had a low price first and then the standing charge, and then over the standing charge, so that even if you couldn't afford to get it for free, there could be a low. So that was quite a long discussion that we had on for several people on when we did the street stalls. I just thought I'll just feed that in, because it was a very meaningful discussion. It was a good, and we will be doing it again. There's no doubt about it. We'll do it again. Thank you very much.
Yeah. No, thanks. And always good to hear from the Leeds Wakefield branch of Unite Community. They've been sharing a lot of our stuff. I guess my counterpoint to it, so first off, with standing charges, we're in favour of them being completely abolished. It's like if you were being charged 500 quid to go or 300 quid to go and pay before you even got to go into a supermarket. It just seems unfair. The other thing on that is it seems unrealistic until you explain the sort of retrofit housing crisis, and we know we need to get all of our housing up to stock, and I can't see how we can do that without this. So this is the only way I think we can effectively get this housing stock upgraded. So it can seem like that, but I think the amount of savings, and when you start, and it's a similar thing with winter fuel payments, where the government thinks that they're saving money by cancelling it, but then someone explained that actually it's going to cost more. The Unite motion won today, so that was just saw before got in. So I think that we'll see what happens there. But yeah, with experience, an average hospital admission costs about £20,000. And when you have this replicated because you're taking away, thousands of pensioners' winter fuel payments, they're not turning their fuel on, something's happening, an aggravated condition, they end up in hospital for it. That's £300 or £20,000. And then when you multiply how many people going in hospital, it's sometimes these kind of things, it might seem like a lot of money or unrealistic, but when you think of all of the knock-on effects of that, it's actually, this is the sensible almost sort of conservative intervention. into that. But yeah, also really glad of all the work that Leeds Wakefield branch does as well, and continue sharing our stuff on Twitter. Whoever runs the social media account, I appreciate. Yeah, Jenny.
Yeah, I'm also in a Unite not-for-profit branch, but in Sheffield, and very keen. I love your campaign. You know, it really chimes with a lot of my experience actually working with people in fuel poverty, and then also in terms of like how it appeals to union concerns, which I've just done my PhD about union concerns about climate change and just transition. So yeah, and I think this is a really excellent campaign. I'd love to get more involved. And yeah, we'll do some of the things you've suggested. I sort of had a slightly technical question, I suppose, about like one of the problems with fuel poverty is that it's a combination of like how leaky and difficult to heat your house is and how low your income is. And I wondered, you know, I know you're saying about incentivizing. I'm just thinking of, you know, the thing which happens quite often, which is an elderly person living in a large, still living in a large house by themselves, which is actually really energy inefficient. And then they're on a perhaps not desperately low income, but quite low income. And they're not really maintaining the household. But the whole thing about like moving has got so many kind of like complications for people. You know, I mean, you might just say, oh, that person's better off in a kind of sheltered flat, but that itself is a huge life transition, and they kind of get stuck in a position where they can't really do that. Perhaps they haven't got family to support. You know, it's like how would you deal with those kind of like anomalous situations? It's not all going to be done just by, you know, I think you need a lot of kind of social effort around changes in energy. Is really what I'm trying to say, I suppose. What do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that is a really good point again. So we're not economists ourselves, but we have worked with a lot of think tanks. So the New Economics Foundation published a really good report on this. I might butcher the analysis of this, so apologies if I'm paraphrasing really badly. But they did some quite detailed modelling on different forms of rising block tariff, and what was actually really impressive on this was that when they started working out what percentage would be better off and what percentage would be worse off of going houses, they eventually got it down to about, depending on where you set the tariff, because there is a cost neutral version of energy for all, more people lose out on that. I think it's about 20,000 or something like that with the cost neutral. I might be getting that number wrong, but the number that did stick in my head was with the recommendations of the block being set, that because we worked with them on this, it was 2,000 people nationally would be worst off, which is actually very small.
Well, yeah,
and that's a few, like you say, older people in large leaky homes with disability aids, but that's then very easy to top up with local authority provision. Once you've got it narrowed down to such a small group of homes, you can retrofit quite easily. So
great.
I can send you.
That's been thought about, and I'll go and have a look at the NEF report.
Yeah, it's called, I think it's a fairest pricing system for families and climate, but if you type in New Economics Foundation Energy for All, it usually comes up as the top result because we're referenced in it.
Thanks. Any other comments, questions, thoughts? So John, thanks so much for it's really interesting, and definitely send through those resources and those links, and I've obviously already got your email address, but I will share that if that's all right, with the group and with the wider group, the wider kind of mailing list, and yeah, we'll see what we can do to support this. I think there's brilliant. Okay, so we'll move on. John, you can stay if you'd like for the remainder of the meeting, but don't feel you need to necessarily. You feel free to get on if you'd prefer.
I can stick around I've got another meeting starting in about 15 minutes, but I'd be interested to hear that. Stick around for a little bit.
Sure. So we'll go over to, hi Steve, by the way, thanks for joining. We'll go to John Romagnoli, who is from our worker-led transition team. So this is a new team that I've mentioned maybe a few times before, or maybe you've seen referenced in some of our literature. A new team from the TUC, the National TUC, looking at essentially how we deal with these green transition issues. John, are you able to give us a bit of a lowdown on what that project is looking like and how our unions can get involved?
Yeah, I'll try my best, Sam.
Cheers.
Especially now I've got some support from my colleague Stephen. So first of all, thanks for the invite for today. Glad to be here, and just a hello to everybody. But I'm John Romagnoli. I'm a project officer on the TUC worker-led Just Transition team. I'm based in Birmingham. There are 4 project officers, so we're quite a small team, with a project researcher based in London, and in conjunction with a company called NEON, who stands for the New Economy Organisers Network. We're leading this Just Transition programme. I think it's fair to say it's in its infancy. We're a small team, and therefore we're heavily reliant upon collaboration with union officials and officers to get meaningful introductions into workplaces. By building trust and a relationship with reps and activists, we can support them whilst they're proactively developing the transition plans to future-proof their workplaces. So the aim of the project really is to future-proof jobs, most importantly, good unionised jobs, whilst protecting or enhancing hard-fought existing terms and conditions in the workplace. So our project at the moment, and it will grow to cover further manufacturing sectors, is focused on high carbon manufacturing sectors that need upgrading in line with government legislation. So those are automotive, which is my background. I was a convener in the factory for a number of years, supplying into all the major vehicle manufacturers in the UK and some abroad. Steel, which Steve leads on. I lead on the ceramics industry. We cover glass, chemicals, wood products, and cement. And as I said, there will be more added as the programme grows. So how do we help reps in workplaces who are going to be affected if they don't transition into less carbon heavy industry? So in the first instance, we can help them undertake a skills and plant audit. That'll help identify retraining or upskilling opportunities. Find out whether the existing plant and machinery can be easily adapted to make alternative product, or is there a need for further investment? If so, how much, and are there grants available? i.e., will the wealth fund be rolled out to everybody who may need it across all those sectors, or will it just be the big few? We can provide technical expertise so that the transition plan's fully costed. We can engage with local councillors, senior civil servants and MPs to gain their support for any transition plans. Most importantly, and as you will have seen down at Port Talbot, at Tatar Steel, we can help with coalition support with climate activists, groups and local community groups. At Port Talbot, it was noticeable that Greenpeace and both Extinction Rebellion came together to show solidarity with workers and the wider community. They understand where there's struggle and poverty, the far right will seize the opportunity to blame plant closures on climate groups in an attempt to turn local communities against them. It was fantastic to see those climate groups actively engaged in supporting the workers. Now, when you talk about transition plans and how they can be differential, if you look at what I would say is a bad transition plan, appalling transition plan, the plan at Tata Steel at Port Talbot. There's just been announced recently that there's been a loss of 3,000 jobs. The steelworks drives the town. It provides so much for the local community, cash-wise. Tata took a £500 million grant off the government. They should have engaged with the trade unions on site. There's 3 trade unions at Tata Steel, Community, GMB, and Unite the Union. They should have engaged in meaningful consultation, and the company didn't. Instead, they announced the closure of the 2 remaining blast furnaces to be replaced by 1 electric arc furnace. Now, everybody understands the need to decarbonise and the benefits to the green economy. But the manner in which Tata have gone about it is absolutely appalling. And that's something that the project is hoping that we can prevent in the future going forward. We were too late for Tata. Similarly, I can give an example of a good transition plan at Ellesmere Port at the Stellantis factory. The reps there several years ago started working on a survival plan, a transition plan, engaged with the company on transforming the site from producing internal combustion engine vans to wholly electric models, including Vauxhall, Cobra, the Opel and the Peugeot. The unions embraced the idea of change, but more importantly, they protected the jobs. Indeed, they enhanced their terms and conditions. The factory shrunk, but it was realigned by the union's proactive involvement. That is what we would term to be a good transition. Obviously, as I said earlier, the project is in its infancy, and it's really important at first that we build trust and relationships with the unions and with the reps on site, and then we can go forward from there, helping them transition. I'm happy to take any questions. I don't know, before I do, whether Steve's got anything he'd like to add. So over to you, Steve, or questions from the wider audience.
Yeah, I'll just come in very briefly, John. I think you've covered that quite well, what the project's about. I think the situation at Tata and Port Talbot is an indication and a good example that maybe we should have been thinking about this type of work many years ago, and now we're in a situation where that is an immediate issue. We're on the brink of losing thousands of jobs in a community whereby the ripple effect will be devastating for that community, for local businesses, and it's going to be really difficult for us now to mitigate that. So I think that's a wake-up call, really, for us, and the work that we can maybe do to stop that happening in other sectors. John mentioned the coalition building. That's really important, and one thing that we found is that when we managed to make those coalitions with climate groups and they stood shoulder to shoulder with workers, that actually gained a lot of traction and interest in the media, which is really, really important, and in terms of trying to change the perception maybe of climate groups, because the reason that climate activists care about the planet is because they care about people, and we can't have climate justice without worker justice. And the question that we need to be asking constantly in these situations is, but what about the workers? What is going to happen to them? And how do we have these conversations in workplaces that further down the line are going to come across a roadblock? So John and I are working with a company in Merthyr Tydfil called Tenneco, who make exhausts. And as we move away from combustion engines, will cars need exhausts in the future? They're not going to. So we're now doing a skills audit and speaking to reps within that site to think about how we can help them and support them in that transition. And I think that's a really good project for us in terms of if we can talk to those reps and see how we can support them and start creating awareness at how we can be forward thinking and future proofing and upgrading our industries, that will be really, really helpful further down the line. My own background was in the printing industry. I lost my job, completely different thing, but because print went digital, and the price of pulp and energy costs and things like that meant that our site closed. I would have loved somebody coming in to support us 5-6 years ago to ask us, are we thinking about how the future might look and what we can do to mitigate those job losses? So I think the really important thing for me anyway is that when we're having these conversations, part of that conversation, the question comes up is, what about the workers? I think there's also an opportunity within our project for a broader offer, really, in terms of creating awareness around this and how we do that. I'd be interested to hear thoughts from the group in terms of how do we get people speaking about it in workplaces. Is there a role for a different type of rep with statutory recognition within workplaces to start driving this conversation, whether that be in conjunction with health and safety reps, union learning reps, green reps, but really, really push this agenda and create awareness. So hopefully that's a pathway that we can kind of foster within the project, but really interested to hear people's thoughts on that. And like John said, any questions you might have, hopefully we can answer them for you.
Thank you very much, both of you. It's a really valuable project, obviously, and I think that with all of these, I mean, you're only dealing with difficult situations, right? You're going into places that are at risk, and you're sort of thinking, okay, how do we constructively solve this problem? And some of them, the positive examples obviously already exist. The negative examples also exist, and they are frightening prospects when we think about how many people are in industries which we can't imagine functioning in the same way in 20, 30 years time, potentially even 5 years time. And so it's a really timely project. As John mentioned, it is sort of specifically about these kind of manufacturing sectors or manufacturing adjacent sectors, but it also has lessons that are a lot broader than that. And so I wonder if anyone here, whether or not you're in those sectors, has any questions or thoughts or comments. Catherine?
And that's really interesting, and it's very necessary. And Sam will know that we in Wakefield, I go to a net zero partnership, and one of those meetings we had the glass industry being highlighted. So it's really important that we do it. Could you just run through? I've got two questions. One is there was one for automotive, one for steel, one for cement. And there was 4 groups, weren't there? Cement, chemicals, glass. That was yours, wasn't it, John? Was there a 4th group? I'll let you come back on that one. And then can I ask another question? Last night I realised that I hadn't done the planning consultation that needed to be done about work places there. But I have done because there's a planning. The government's done a planning consultation that was yesterday, a closed day. But I've put in there about factories building houses, modular houses in factories, because you could have builders building eco-friendly houses in factories, not needing as much time to go out onto horrible cold working places and build insulated homes. And that would seem to me to be a really good suggestion of a factory that we ought to be trying to get. that would meet lots of agendas on all sorts of things, and you would be able to have, you know, building being done by people that can't go and spend travelling off to other places. So I just make that as a suggestion. Thank you.
Maybe we'll respond to that and then we'll go to Simon.
Yeah, Catherine, thanks for your questions. Are really valid. The sectors that we're interested in, and it's split across the team of 4 project officers, but basically we're dealing with automotive, steel, ceramics, glass, chemicals, wood products, and cement.
Right.
And very shortly, we've just been joined by our final colleague who's based up in the northeast, and he'll be looking at offshore wind turbines and the petroleum industry. So that was your first point. Your second point, yeah, I mean, the idea of a just transition plan, it really is about ideas like you've just said there, maybe changing what you're producing from something to something like housing that you can do in factories. You know, the project that Stephen spoke about down at in South Wales at Tenneco. I went to a very informal first meeting with the plant manager and a regional officer from Unite and a national officer from Unite and a researcher from Unite. And basically we just asked, you know, how did he see in 4 years' time when they stopped building exhausts, what could they turn their hand to? The most important thing he said was his workforce are really, really highly skilled welders of the highest authority. They can transition into other areas. They maybe transition into making wood turbines, but basically they could possibly turn their hand to anything. What we can't allow to happen is for industries to do what's happened at Tatar and just say, we've finished our last production of exhaust systems. They're not needed in electric vehicles. Thank you, but no thank you. And we lose those skills forever. So, any ideas are welcome, because I'll be honest with you, it's not something I'd thought about as an alternative. We're looking at, alternatives within the machinery that they've already got, just by tinkering with it. And so there's no huge cost. But yeah, it's a very valid point you make.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Steve's got his hand up, so presumably you want to follow up on that before we go to
Yeah, just on the idea of building houses in factories, Catherine, that's a brilliant idea. And I was fortunate enough a couple of weeks ago to go up to Glasgow, where there's a company who are actually kind of doing that in kind of a trial project at the moment. I think they're called City Building, and they built. Some of you may be aware, I think they built houses for the Commonwealth Village, eco houses, constructed from wood, and really, really interesting to see how they're putting them together. And I think there may be a project where they're doing some for homeless people as well. It would be great if that work is kind of like expanded and it takes up. It's still in its infancy stage at the moment, but that's the kind of forward thinking that we need, isn't it? I think, yeah, it's a great idea.
Thanks. We've got a few questions, so maybe we'll hear all the comments or questions and then come back to you both, just to sort of make it a bit more efficient. So if we go Simon, then Jenny, then Gwen.
It's kind of a question to the group. So in terms of talking about standards for retrofit, what are we looking at there in terms of the standards? Is it passive house or equivalent, or are we looking at something else? Is that decided yet, or do we not know what standard we're looking to get to?
Oh, well, maybe I can just quickly come back, but no, let's go through the original plan. We'll answer that in a bit. Jenny.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. It's really brought it alive. And I've come across an example also in Wakefield, actually, where Catherine was talking about, which was about the local authority and their waste collection operation and how they were turning that over to electric trucks, and all the job transition issues around that, and how they had to sort of change all their scheduling, and their mechanics were, having to go from sort of bashing things with a hammer to kind of doing very clever digital things. So there was a really big transition. Yeah, that was one example. And the other example, or the other question I had was, I've been looking at like what the South Yorkshire Mayoral Authority does recently, and like they're getting more powers around helping businesses and helping economic development. And obviously they are, sort of got climate change on their agenda, but it's like trying to move them away from this thing about, oh, we just get any old company to kind of inward invest into an area, and actually thinking about how do we protect what we have, and actually, sort of grow things more from the ground up, with this kind of knowledge from universities, for example, starting new businesses, like the factory built homes is a brilliant example. That was one of the examples when I was talking to somebody about the other day as well. There's a lot we could do around, especially around materials and how we use materials better. Yeah, so there's lots to go at, and I just wondered if that thing about working with like mayoral authorities had come up at all.
Thanks. If we, Gwen.
Yeah, I've got a couple of points really. First of all, we knew during the pandemic that it was possible. I mean, not everybody did it honestly, but to actually transform certain industries, to provide ventilators and that sort of thing. So we know it can be done, and we know how much that encourages workers. It seems to me that we have a morale problem with any place that's going to have a just transition, and the more positive examples we can give them, the more encouragement that this isn't the end of the line for them, because some of those workers will be thinking, well, if I don't have a job, there could be over 50 and they think, well, where is there for me? But there's a whole wealth of skills there untapped. And I think they also can use these people to teach the apprentices of the future. That's important. And I think that my second point would be that I went to a wealth building conference in Wakefield on Monday, and it's clear that, places like Preston have transformed their society so that it's bringing wealth locally and it's not going out of the city. And it seems to me that that money and those skills can be adapted elsewhere, and you can stop outsourcing to major sort of, if you like, international, and keep them with local companies, give them support, make sure that apprenticeship schemes are proper schemes where at the end of the apprenticeship people do actually have a job, and the more that can be involving building, modular building, I think is great. And I've seen some passive house developments that look very interesting, and of course are well insulated and will stop this having to be retrofitted in some years' time. So I think there's lots of positive examples, but I would say that trade unions, and especially their officers, have got to be more positive about what the future holds. And it stops people sinking into thinking, well, I've nothing to offer, or I've got lots to offer, but I don't think they're interested in what I've got to offer, because many of those skills are absolutely transferable, aren't they? And the pandemic proved a lot of that. That's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Gwen. They're really important points. We'll go to Debbie.
Right. Thank you, John and Steve. As ever, can I do a shout out for the Climate Jobs book from the Campaign Against Climate Change Trade Union Group, because it's about building a workforce for the climate emergency to tackle that. You know, worker-led transition, of course, reminds us of the Lucas plan. And the Lucas workers wanted out of arms production into socially useful production. And we live in a market system, capitalism, where what counts is profit. And it doesn't matter how destructive the product is, all they care about is making more and more and more of it. So, like, just to open up questions around what would be socially useful, and, you know, jobs in public services that are just totally trashed. So radically rethinking what sort of jobs people could go to. And of course, talking it through like they did in Scotland with the oil workers, who said, our jobs are shit. We hate being on the oil rigs. If we could work on, you know, wind turbines, how much better, but we can't afford the training because it's all, you know, not provided for us. So, and even one idea I read somewhere about turning the M1 into a railway, because cars and private transport like that can't go on forever. So I guess just to open, because I always do this, try and think of the bigger picture, you know, as well as not allowing Port Talbot and other workers to be treated like the miners were and their communities. I get that, you know, but just to throw in a few more questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. Thanks, Debbie. Brilliant, as always. So I'll come back to John and Steve. There's a lot to address there. So the things I noted down were Simon talking about retrofit standards and where we want to get to. Maybe that's a specific question. Jenny stressed the complexity of these transitions and the kind of multifaceted nature of those, and also the connections with local authorities or combined authorities and that kind of broader thinking. Gwen spoke about the example of, yeah, they were all very eager to turn to making ventilators, weren't they, during the pandemic, and yet now it's a little bit more difficult, isn't it? Why is that? Potentially it's this kind of moral problem. Also, is this tied in with community wealth building and kind of maybe local industrial strategies as well? And then Debbie made the very good point that this is obviously a sort of continuation of or inspired by Lucas Plan, and that's so socially useful work. And then I think that the Scottish project you're referring to was the platform project where they worked very carefully together. So if I'll come back to John and Steve, if you want to address any of those.
I think it'd be better maybe, Sam, if you answered Simon's question on our behalf. But I love the positivity amongst the group, because that's what we need within all the workplaces, regardless of what sector, you know, ceramics or glass or whatever. So the positivity is there, as Jenny pointed out, you know, transferable skills. Working on electric vehicles is different from working on ICE vehicles. There'll be an awful lot of mechanics who over a number of years will be displaced, and there's got to be something for those people to do. And they probably, in a lot of instances, won't be in big garages. There'll be one man or one lady, one woman bands. So, you know, they can't be left behind. It's as simple as that. It sounds very simple. I hope a lot of the issues that we've had with the previous government with regard to funding for projects will be, I won't say they disappear, because that just won't happen, but I would hope that there be a lot more money set aside in the wealth fund You know, it's gone from 2 billion to 7 billion. I still think it's a drop in the ocean compared to what might be needed. But you know, everything that everybody said is 100% correct. You know, we did turn our hand to making ventilators during COVID. We came a full circle around how we adapted to working in a different environment. People in offices suddenly working from home, and the challenges that brought, you know, to people of my generation. Team and Zoom calls. Normally my meetings are held face to face. You can shake hands, and you know, you can have a cup of tea or a glass of wine or a beer after the meeting. And now we have adapted, and we've got to continue to adapt. I hope that answers some of the points. I'm sure Steve will throw a bit more weight behind it.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting what the question Gwen asked in terms of how do we lift the morale of workers who are at risk in these industries. And I think there needs to be positive examples, and it was great that that we spoke about what the work that was done during COVID. It was reactive to a situation, and I think we grow morale by pointing to good examples like that. There's also the I think, I can't remember who mentioned it, about what jobs that can actually benefit us socially. There's a great example of the GKN workers in Florence in Italy who occupied the factory and started to look at what they could make that would benefit people socially. Fashioned some kind of bicycle. I can't remember off the top of my head how that product actually looked, but the thinking was brilliant, and that's what we need to be thinking about. And I think that's why there's a job of work to be done in creating awareness amongst workers and to get people in that mindset of thinking about the future. I think there's a great opportunity as well. When I spoke earlier about a different kind of reps role within the movement, I think there's a great opportunity to get some more diversity in the movement. Young people, we can engage them a lot. I feel anyway, in my experience, that when we talk about environmental issues, that's something that young people are interested in, whereas maybe historically trade unionists have perhaps looked a little bit like myself and John, who've kind of been around the block within industries and are used to discussing and negotiating terms and conditions. So I think there's a great opportunity to get young people involved. And then finally, I think it was maybe Debbie who mentioned oil workers and jobs that they could do. I think I read somewhere recently that oil workers were saying that they would quite happily go and work in the care sector if terms and conditions were favourable. My experience when I was about to lose my job, I'd have quite happily done something that would have contributed to society, whether that's a hospital porter or a care worker or something like that. But the drop off in terms and conditions was a lot, you know, it was a lot to consider. So I think there's that kind of conundrum, isn't there? So there's jobs where we need people to do, where we're struggling to recruit, but the terms and conditions are favourable, and that is not a transition. And also the jobs need to be there for people to go to, the new jobs, whether it's the social housing or wind turbines. There needs to be those opportunities ready and available. And we hear a lot of people talking about green jobs, but what workers want to know is what do they look like and where are they? And I think if we can illustrate and point towards good examples of that, then that might help lift the morale and certainly go a long way to helping change the perception, which is quite negative. One of the issues that we face is trying to get into workplaces. I've got a call after this call, and I fear that the reps who I'll be speaking to might be a little bit afraid of us going and talking to their workers about what the future might look and how that might be a dark picture, and creating a negative morale within the workplace. So that's something that we need to think about how we tackle that. I hope that answered some of the questions anyway.
I think that's really good. So both of you, thank you very much. On the specific thing about retrofit, just because I was looped in on that, I think there's different levels. I think obviously kind of passive house is the goal that we'd all like to be at, but being that no houses essentially are already at that level, it means upgrading 28 million homes over a very short time period. That's obviously a very difficult thing to do and very expensive thing to do and a very invasive thing to do in workplaces, in particular households. The current goals from government are EPCC, which is a sort of good average and is achievable by most homes. We're supporting that generally in the movement. There's different discussions about how that can be achieved, but I think the general preference is as good as possible, and recognizing that some properties like mine is a single, it's just brick, my house, my terrace, so it's never going to be that great, to be honest. It was built over 100 years ago, so it's, the upgrade cost is huge. It can be done, but it maybe is never going to be a passive house. But I think they're really useful responses. Ellen, you've got your hand up, and also you came in halfway through that discussion. Hi, Ellen, thanks for joining us, and also Zach. Hi, Zach, for joining us as well. If we go to Ellen.
Okay, a couple of things. Yeah, I came in, I think, just before Simon was speaking about the idea of having a new type of rep in the workplace, whose job is not merely the kind of internal greening of stuff in the workplace, but is actually thinking beyond that into the possibilities for, perhaps retooling and upskilling, and or what can we move into, what other things, what other possibilities are there for the future. And but also interesting that he's endorsed Debbie's point about the fact that when we're thinking about socially needed work, that actually that there is also a need for a kind of transition into more people-centered work, and care work and health work and so on. And as Simon's rightly said, the terms and conditions are so low in most of those sectors that it becomes unviable for on a personal level for somebody who's been in a technical sector. But I'm just thinking the idea of what I was first thinking of was the kinds of people who come to these particular meetings, and is there a way that the constituency for these type of meetings can be extended, not so that it's not just about the people who are already in work areas that are facing potential decline from decarbonisation, or that are facing immediate transition needs, but also what about the sectors that have labour shortages? That's one thing. The technical sectors have got potentially catastrophic labour shortages, and it's not that this is about workers who don't exist at the moment, although some of them could transition from other sectors, such as we've been talking about. But also, do we need people in these meetings from those other sectors that are not the sectors that we usually think about when we're thinking about transition, that are not the technical sectors? Can we have people in the room who are in representing the care sector, for example, or the land work sector? That's another big one, where it's socially useful work that's desperately badly paid and quite exploitative. So because my thinking about if there was this new kind of rep whose job was to help people to think and explore beyond what's the future look like, then the natural step there would be for those reps in different workplaces and different sectors to actually meet together and have a collaborative discussion about transition as well, that takes it somewhere beyond the immediate inside this workplace kind of, because that is something we're going to need, isn't it? A kind of cross workplace and even cross sector collaboration to get this right. So I know that that's an ambitious step beyond, but I feel like it's necessary, and it's connected with the idea that maybe there are some sectors that need to be involved but are currently so undervalued that we need to bring into the conversation.
Thanks, Ellen. I think that's really important points that you make. And yeah, to pick up on that, if I may, to pick up on that point Steve made about a new type of rep. I think that rep already, from my own point of view, I think that rep already exists in the green rep. I think the green rep, there are sort of different ways of looking at this, but yes, historically they have looked quite internally to their own workplace. I think a slight rebrand there as something more like a transition rep, as a sort of, future economy rep, without changing the name again, because they're already called a million different things in a million different settings, is probably the way forward here. A plug for our new course, Green Reps at Work, which we're putting on at the end of November. That's our plan. That's what we're going to try and set up Green Reps to be doing in our region. So you can sign up for that. It's on the website, etc., etc. But we'll go back to Steve and John to respond.
Yes. Sorry, Sam. When I agree, it probably is a rebranding job. I'm not kind of suggesting that it's separate work. I think one of the issues is in the sectors that would, in manufacturing in particular, we don't see a lot of green reps, or that maybe it's something around the language that gives people a misconception around that work, and I think that's something that we probably need to do some work on, the language and how that looks, and to engage people into this, because we managed to do it when we talk about engaging and recruiting health and safety reps in manufacturing, because that's something they can see as immediate and important, and I think that takes some focus from the movement itself in how we kind of, whether it's a rebrand or how we illustrate that to workers to get more reps within those manufacturing workplaces involved in this kind of work. And I think the point that Ellen made about getting these people in the same room and having these conversations that we have in these types of meetings, and I was at Congress last week at some of the fringe meetings, and there was lots of great conversations. We just need these conversations to be happening in workplaces, and to get that movement from the bottom up, because I think quite a lot of the answers to the problems that we're facing lie in government, and we need to be influential in the decision making and the policy making, and that needs to come from us. But great point that Ellen made there, and just to clarify, I'm not talking about the role is there. It's how we rebrand it and how we engage the people we need to be doing that work as well.
I think also we just prior to this call, me and Steve were on another call, and it became very apparent that obviously there is a big crossover between the sectors. The issues are broadly the same. Timelines may be different, but I was a convener for Unite the Union and heavily involved in their risk meetings and this meetings. And what we're finding now is it is very, very sectoral, and it isn't necessarily where you cross from one combine to another. So you'll meet with people who do automotive, you'll meet with people who do chemicals, and never the twain shall meet. And that's something that I think we will have to change, because it really is important that people are reading off the same script. that we've all got the same common goal, which is about transitioning to a greener, better future for our children and our children's children. You know, a lot of the people me and Steve meet are of a similar age, and our time at work really is coming to an end. So it's about future-proofing jobs for the young people, and we can only do that. And it's the project is in its infancy, and it will grow and it will change as we get great ideas from people like yourselves. We'll put those into practice. We'll push for being able to talk to more than one sector at any one time, because I think that's really important, and to diversify into what we see as a good transition. Excuse me.
Definitely. Thanks both for coming back on that. We will move on, but Simon, do you want a last thought?
Yeah, sorry, another quick question on standards. I'm not obsessed with standards, but so I'm thinking of carbon literacy training and discussions in green reps circles and within organisations of things like scope and looking at scope. And the question, I guess, is where do we want to, as a group, are you looking at any wins in any kind of scope, or are you looking to work in particular scopes one at a time? Like, how's that being approached, I guess?
Do you want to come back on that quickly, you two?
And sorry, Simon, I was really struggling with the sound then. Could I ask you to repeat it? I'm just trying to turn my speaker up so I can hear it.
So I'm asking about, in terms of carbon literacy training, when they talk about scope of the emissions, just what the discussion has been like in the groups that you've been working with in that area, and if that's happened at all, I guess. So, yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you.
I don't know whether I didn't know whether it was my connection. I think this is why, like John said, we're in our infancy and we're learning. But I think this is why my thinking is that we need to broaden what we do to create that awareness around carbon literacy in workplaces. And this is why I think there's a definite role in manufacturing for somebody within the workplace to really drive that. I don't think there's a great deal of awareness in the sectors that we're looking around carbon literacy. John might have had different experiences to myself, but it feels that, like, when we're speaking to people, we're trying to kind of explain that a little bit ourselves. And I think that's a job of work for people who are perhaps better placed than us, but it's something that we should definitely be focusing on and working on a pathway to get that into workplaces. I don't know whether you want to comment on that, John.
I just agree really with what you say, Steve, because certainly within the sectors that I'm working in, ceramics, for example, they have transition plans. It's about accessing funding for anything. So the IATF fund only seems to be available to the big players, not the small and medium term businesses. And although they've got equipment that they can use, there might not be access to the grid for the electric, because there's no no infrastructure in place. As far as our roles go, our policy officers would be probably better placed than me and Steve. We're at ground level, and they talk to civil servants about it on a ecological level that is well beyond our capabilities and our remit indeed. But it's really important, and it's something we can take back maybe to our team and report back on at a future date. If that satisfies.
Thanks. They're great answers. We are going to have to move on. There is another question in the chat from Leanne, who's meeting her chief officer for climate and green spaces today, and chief officer of housing in Leeds. She asked what we think would be a good opening question to ask about their future plans for workers. I mean, if I may, my opening question was, do you have a plan for workers? Your transition plan will be there, or your kind of ambition will be there, your strategy will be there. Has this been mapped against the needs of the workforce? Which I imagine the answer to be will be no, or partly, or I'm sure we'll work it out. I'm going to have to move on because we're a little short, so I'm just going to have to assume that everyone agrees with my answer there. In answer to Jenny's question in the chat, yes, we'll circulate the details of the worker-led transition team and also other resources that they've got here. I think it's been really helpful having you both here today. That's been a really helpful conversation. It's obviously stimulated a lot of thoughts. The ask here is that that everyone here supports that and supports that project. It's obviously got a lot of legs, and I think if you've got contacts in those specific sectors that they mentioned, which again were automotive, steel, ceramics, glass, ceramics, I've already said ceramics, chemicals, petrochemicals, wood, and cement, then it would be fantastic to kind of link them up and get that going. But also I think broader, and I think it speaks to those kind of broader issues about community wealth building and about Lucas plans and about socially responsible work and all this stuff. It all has to fit in within that, which is good because our region obviously has a kind of that kind of broad approach too. So I think we can work in tandem on that. John and Steve, you're welcome to stay for the last 7 minutes, but you also you can head off if you'd like. Thank you very much for joining us for this. I'll just quickly update everyone. So network activities. So we've as you might recall from emails or from a previous meeting, we have the ambition of this group is that it would be great if we had more sort of breakaways, more kind of working groups working on specific projects or particular campaigns. One of these has already been set up, so it's looking at green rep rights. Facility times came up in the chat, and the fact is that we don't have facility time to be able to organise effectively in this sector, whether it's about transition or whether it's about greening workplaces or environmental matters. So we've looked at this and we've kind of so far delved a bit into the history of this. It goes back to, there was the first reference to green shop stewards is back from 1989, really quite a long time ago. And we've obviously been building on that since. We've been building in this working group a case study library, which I will make you all aware of as soon as it's available. It should be very soon. And also collated a kind of basic standard green rep job description based on what the TC and other unions have called for in motions and also in working practice of green reps. And vitally, that kind of distills our asks into a sort of one-pager to government or to whoever that says green reps are important, they do X, Y, and Z, and to enable that to happen, to enable the swift transfer of transition to greener ways of working and the transition of the economy, we need more green reps, and they need facility time, importantly, to undertake training, carry out environmental impact or climate impact audits or related things, and to represent members' interests on this matter. So whether that's directly or whether that's in joint environmental forums or committees or however individual places work it. And then going forward, so that work is kind of ongoing. We are looking, which Leanne referred to right at the beginning of this meeting, looking at contacting MPs, local MPs, to start this process. I've had some good soundings from some of them that this is something they're interested in, and so it may be something that we're able to find a legislative route to recognition of facility time and green reps in during this Parliament. We'll update you, I guess, as more comes on stream here. If anyone's interested in joining that group and working more on this, get in touch and we can loop you in. It'd be good to get as broad a base of support as possible. And campaigning. Once we have specific asks, maybe a template letter or something like this, or a petition, we'll obviously circulate it, so you'll be looped in that way. But if anyone wants to be more directly involved, then that would be great. I'm conscious of time, so I'm not going to open that to questions, but that's just an update on what we're doing. I'll also circulate, I'll just kind of go through announcements, and if anyone else has any announcements to add on, that would be fantastic as well. So firstly, we're holding that Green Rep course that I referred to. It's 27th, 28th, 29th of November. It's designed to have that interventionist, non-reactive, but very proactive Green Rep person in every workplace. So we've already got a lot of people signed up, but there are still spaces, so you can sign up. I'll circulate the link. We're also in the TUC running a program of workshops for trade union organisers, which will explore how green rep issues are becoming increasingly relevant in all workplaces. It's kind of related to this worker-led transition thing, I guess. The idea of those workshops is that they'll be advertised individually, and they're all on slightly different topics, but they're open to kind of lay or paid organisers in unions. The first one is actually on worker-led transition and is from midday till 2 o'clock in Sheffield on the 5th of November, I think. Again, I will circulate details to that. It'd be great to get some of you along to that. They're very interactive, so we want it to be open and proper discussion based to see what we can get with it. Expressions of interest are open for the Net Zero Northeast England Summit, which is the end of November as well in Newcastle. I'll circulate details of that, but it'd be great to get some trade unionists on that. As Debbie's already mentioned, and others, York Environment Weeks is in full swing, and there are a series of events specifically on DRAX. We had a good one yesterday on divestment run by Unison, but there are some interesting things there, so I'll circulate those details, and there's some in the chat already. I'll mention that Fare Free London is holding a hybrid public meeting to discuss free public transport on the 29th of the month. That is obviously kind of about London, but also has these implications across the whole country. The Campaign for Climate Change Trade Union Group are holding an online meeting shortly, 3rd of October, I think it is, on basically to celebrate the passage of Composite 18, which is a trade union, a motion that went through TUC Congress, which is positive for the climate. It's to kind of sort of recognize where that is and think about, okay, what's that mean for the movement? What do we do next about green organising? I've already circulated some bits from Greener Jobs Alliance that have produced various pieces recently reflecting on Congress and the motions in advance, but also afterwards. There's a good piece that I'll circulate details for. I'll let you know that there are a lot of these. I didn't quite appreciate how many I've got. Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission is releasing its new climate action plan. It's this thing here, actually. Tomorrow, so there's a link there, which is good. It's a good document, but it's also something that local authorities specifically have all technically signed up to. So if you find something good in there that your local authority is not doing or your area is not doing, you can say, well, look, you've already signed up to it, so you have to do it. So it's a good good organising tool. And finally, which was referred to earlier, the XGKN workers struggle in Florence is obviously an ongoing thing that people may be aware of. There's a UK solidarity network in operation now, and they're looking for funding to support support that effort, and also some sort of screenings of, they've got a video highlighting the struggles there, which might be worth viewing or potentially putting on viewings in branches. It's a very interesting document. But anyway, they're the things that I needed to rattle through before past. Has anyone else got any announcements to make before we close? Jenny, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick heads up about the date on a group of us from trade unions and climate movement in Sheffield are organising a conference on Saturday the 9th of November, which is going to be linking climate jobs and climate justice. It's a kind of South Yorkshire focused thing, but others would be welcome to come along if you wish to. And it's going to be linking climate jobs and climate justice with the global justice issues, with union campaigns and community wealth building ideas to redesign the South Yorkshire economy, basically.
Excellent. There are a few bits in the chat as well, which I'll circulate afterwards. Ellen, do you want to come in?
Yeah, the thing that Jenny's just announced is going to clash with a very similar event, a national event that's being planned in Leeds on energy, a strategy meeting for energy campaigners. So it's a little bit different because I think the focus is on linking up all the different energy campaigns that are happening all over the place, which are not, you know, they're one of the themes is about connecting the you know, social movement climate activism with trade union climate activism, obviously, but also connecting up kind of groups that are working on specific things, like you know, people that are working on green jobs instead of coal mines, or you know, people that are working on you know, being critical of particular developments that are happening in their regions. So yeah, there's a lot of overlap there, which is a pity. But yeah, there are things happening every single weekend between now and forever. So yeah, but I've yet to put together a proper sort of invite to that with specific details of what's going to be happening, because there's been so much else happening in the last few weeks.
Brilliant, thanks, Alan. Are there any more announcements to add before we close? No, brilliant. Okay, well, thank you very much for attending. Only slightly over, and I'll circulate all those details, including everything in the chat as well, so we can all know what we're doing. Thanks to our guests, and thanks as always to you guys giving an hour and a half of your valuable time to this network. Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yes.
Lovely to meet you.
Bye all.
Thanks, Sam.